You're tuned in to Tom Foolery.
We're taking your calls. How is Trump handling COVID-19? How is your local government handling it? Your county, your city. How is what do you think about the stimulus package? Um, Let us know. All right. I got a first caller up. What's up? You there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right.
I'm pretty pleased. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good. I'm pretty pleased with the way the government has reacted. I do have some reservations about how much we've done and how much we are going to continue to do financially, because when we had the swine flu, H1N1 back 10 years ago, we had, tons and tons of deaths. We had 16,000 deaths. Wasn't even reported until after we had 1,000. And I fear that we are going to bankrupt our country unnecessarily. But I'm pretty pleased with the way, especially with the way Trump, I feel like he has been forced to react. And if he didn't react as much as he has and didn't do as much as he has, he would be roundly criticized by the Democrats. So they've put forth Andrew Cuomo daily, and some of the networks have stopped having the Trump briefings and have instead started having Andrew Cuomo. So it looks like this is becoming political, that they are using this to put forth a candidate and are going to possibly switch candidates in midstream here, even though all the work and all the campaigning has been done. Go ahead.
Do you think that the way that a president handles a pandemic is not already political?
Again, I feel like his hand was forced, and so he was kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I feel like he did what he had to do, and he will continue to do what he has to do in order to keep the criticism low. But I do feel like as a nation, we've probably overreacted. I do understand that other countries are having a much worse time, but each one of them has a reason. And I could go through them, but America is in a different situation from the rest. But beyond that, it troubles me that we're potentially going to be shutting down huge swaths of territory that are rural and almost uninhabited, with 1 or 2 thousand people in a county, or even less. You go to Montana, Wyoming, and out in New Mexico and out there where there's almost no one living, and they're shutting down the whole county, keeping people in. I think the cure may be worse than the cause here.
Yeah, I don't know if people are overreacting. Like, I haven't watched CNN or MSNBC or anything like that, so I don't know what they're saying or what the overreaction would be. I think it's serious, and I think it's meant to be taken seriously. I don't think the swine flu is even a comparison, just because we're not even we're maybe a third of the way through this, and it's spreading at a faster rate than the swine flu ever did. So the
swine flu infected 60,000 Americans and killed 16,000. So it's comparable numbers as far as I can tell. But again, it's the people that are going to be hurt are the elderly, and I'm probably considered to be one of them. I'm 65, almost 66. So, people like me, we need to take great precautions. I'm glad that, I'm glad that uh, it is that people are concerned about the elderly. They could just say, well, they're as good as dead anyway, so let's just forget them. But they are making ventilators and coming up with as much medicine as they can to stop this thing. But my greatest fear is it's going to bankrupt our country. I know that we'll not be the same. Once this is over, we will not be the same. Shaking hands will probably be a thing of the past. And working from home and schooling from home and homeschooling, which are not necessarily the same thing. Schooling from home, which is internet, and homeschooling, which is parents, are to me two different things. But I think that will become more the norm, and schools, regular schools, will be diminished tremendously. So it's gonna shake up everything, I'm afraid. Some for the good, some for the bad.
Yeah. We were already like going into a downturn in the economy, so this is definitely a bad time for a pandemic for sure. It's not, and for everybody to be out of work. I mean, we just set a record. Like 3 million people just signed up for what is
Unemployment.
yeah, unemployment. Like that's a lot.
Well, I'm not sure what you're talking about when you say we were about to have a downturn or we're in a downturn. We were at full employment. Stock market was going crazy, breaking records every day. So I'm not sure what you mean about a downturn, but it was triggered by this. And one thing that's going to come out of this, which is a good thing, I think, is that we are going to pull back the pharmaceutical manufacturing from China back and bring it back to the U.S. And I was not aware, and I don't think many people were aware that, a huge, I think it was something like 80% or even 90% of our pharmaceuticals were being manufactured in China. And they actually, hinted that they were going to hold that over our heads and not give us medicine. We've got the medicine and we're not going to give it to you, blah, blah, blah. And that's fighting words right there. But Trump and the leadership are going to be quiet about that until this is all over. They're not going to stir that pot. But I think that's definitely going to change. But I think also China is they're going to the weaker nations and they're providing masks and so forth for those weaker nations, and everything comes with a price. And those weaker nations are going to align themselves with China. So we're going to see a realignment of politics in the world. China already owns a huge percentage of ports around the world. They almost bought the Los Angeles port about 10 years ago here in the U.S., and Michael Savage found out about it and stopped it. But they are growing in their influence. After this, they need to be exposed for who they are and what they've done, and hopefully the world will open its eyes and not hold a hand out and let China bribe them into aligning with them.
Okay, so I'm looking at the stats right now. So the United States has 123,000 cases right now. We have 19,000 new cases. So I think that I think that means within the last 7 days.
Yeah, great, better testing, more testing. Yeah.
Yes, and I was about to say, and that's with like very limited testing. Like from what we know, less than half the people who want to be tested are actually getting tested. Like I know people who have called the doctors or called emergency rooms and said, hey, like I have all of these symptoms. I think I have it. And they say, look, just stay home. If it gets worse, call us back. But they're not like they're not testing them unless it's super severe, and then
Right.
they want to find out whether or not they have it. So when we say we have 19,000 cases, this is 19,000 new cases. This means, like in my head, that means we have 19,000 new severe cases. That if they're only testing the people who were really bad off and telling everybody else just stay home and deal with it, then we have 19,000 new severe cases.
Right. Well, the governor of Georgia did an interview today, and he said that we are 2 weeks behind in our data. So he said anything you hear today is 2 weeks old.
Yeah.
And he said what's going on today will not be reported even close to accurately for another 2 weeks. So
Right.
we're behind the curve. But we do know that.
But it's going to go up, not down, right?
Probably. I mean, again, people are sheltering. A lot of people are sheltering in place, and that's hopefully that'll flatten the curve. But he was considering, closing even the rural counties, which that's what made me concerned. I personally just don't. We have a number of counties in Georgia that are urban, suburban, and then a couple that are way out, like Doherty and Rome and so forth, that are not heavily populated as like Atlanta is. But we have 159 counties in Georgia. So out of those, we've only got a dozen that are hot zones, and 147 that are not. And to me, to close those counties down, it does, and plus that doesn't give people a place to go. I mean, they could go out to those counties and stay, get away from it if they wanted to. I don't know, but I do know that the younger you are, the less chance of death, and so the symptoms get milder and milder. Typically, the younger you are. So the people that are at greatest risk are people like my age and up, 65 and up. So, and especially those with compromised immune systems and lung and heart issues. So personally, I'm not super concerned about it because I'm very healthy, and I play basketball still and spent the day cutting grass today, and so I'm not super concerned about it. But there are, if I had a compromised immune system, I'd definitely be concerned. I'd be wearing a mask, and I don't know that I'd be going out as much as I am. So, but in response to your question, is Trump doing all that he can, all that he should? I feel like he's kind of been forced to, but I also am happy to see him pushing for as early a date as possible to get to beyond this. Typically, these bugs, these influenza style bugs, abate in the warm weather, and so I'm hoping that from May until September, this thing will drop down, and then of course it could mutate. We could have a whole different strain of it by next fall, but by then I think we will have gotten ahead of it. I think, with the billions that are being thrown at it, that we will have gotten ahead of it, and we can handle this. I mean, I lived in New York City for many years, and New York City is very socialistic, and they allow the federal government to take care of their hospitals. Well, they had tons of hospitals closed because doctors would not take Medicare and Medicaid. So those hospitals closed. Now they have a shortage of doctors and a shortage of hospitals. Well, duh. I mean, they did that. So they're blaming everything on Trump as if, he was the one that closed the hospitals, but it was their policies that did that. So, they need to step up and do what they've got to do and stop whining. But I feel that Andrew Cuomo is going to be almost certainly the next candidate for president. It's not going to be Joe Biden. Joe is hunkered down someplace in a basement, and Andrew Cuomo has stepped up, and that's fine. Rightfully so.
I don't think that's happening. Joe Biden is definitely going to. There's no way. There's almost no way Joe's going to win, especially now that the left is kind of separating. I just got done talking to a guy about this. How there's and I did a video last week on this. How there's these Bernie or Buster guys who are saying if Bernie's not the candidate, then we're not voting at all. We don't want to have anything to do with this election if Bernie's not the candidate. So that means like a big portion of the Democratic voters are just not voting now. They're just not even going to the polls. And so that means Biden absolutely has no chance now.
Well, for one thing, we already knew that young people don't vote. Young voters, that's the paradox. There's almost no such thing as young voters. Young people don't vote. And that's gotten worse and worse as time has gone on. It's become worse and worse. So people under 30, which is where the Bernie Bros primarily are, don't vote anyway. It's not gonna really affect the election at all that people do or don't vote for Bernie.
I mean, they put Bernie in second place, and they put what's her name? Warren in third place. If you combine the Bernie and Warren votes, they had more than Biden. So
but we're talking about very small numbers of people in those same towns where you're talking about 50,000 votes for one and 30 or 40 for the other. Trump, when it wasn't even advertised, got hundreds of thousands or even millions of votes. So comparatively speaking, the numbers of people that are voting Democrat are low and will continue to be low because there's so many young people that just don't vote.
Okay,
but I do feel like Andrew Cuomo being on TV constantly. I mean, he's on the news. He's every time he sneezes, they've got a camera in his face. He is definitely, and I feel like they've pulled away from Biden. You rarely see him. You rarely hear him on the radio. You rarely see him in the papers, and you rarely see him on the news. They realize that this guy is weak and old and probably can't endure the rigors of a tough candidacy and election. So I believe they've moved to Andrew Cuomo. And I was living in New York when his father was governor of New York for 2 terms, and he was a strong. His name was Mario Cuomo. He was a strong governor, very strong, and Andrew, he's a lot like his dad in that regard. So being strong. So I think we're seeing a changing of the guard here. It's just my opinion.
So all right, I'm looking at the comments. We got Jimmy here says. The facts are simple. We are slow playing everything. Look at New York and Italy. They are both examples of what it can be. If we have a nationwide shutdown, it does what everyone wants. There is one negative, that's economy, but guess what? It's already going to crap. My wife is a nurse in all this, and a shutdown gives hospitals a chance to stock up on supplies. Each state is headed towards New York. Why not just squash it before you get there? And that is the main thought. We're not worried about whether or not this the death rate is not the big problem right now. The death rate is becoming Italy. The problem is becoming Italy. The problem is that we have to slow the curve, and if this is slowly escalating right now, but projections say that at some point it's just going to shoot straight up into the thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions. And once it gets into the millions, we're done. That's it. It's over. Like, we're screwed. The United States has exactly 1 million hospital beds for this. They can fit 1 million people across the entire United States into hospital beds. And so if it gets up over 1 million, they start doing what Italy did and said, hey, if you're above this age, don't even come. Just get your family together, get your get your things in order. What do they say? What's the saying?
Put your estate
get your
in
affairs
order.
in orders. Yeah, get your affairs in orders. Yeah. And so that's the main fear, is that we have to slow the curve. Everybody can get it. That's fine. 100% of the population can get it. No big deal. It's not a big deal. What the problem is how fast they get it. If everybody gets it at once, because of how easy it is to catch this thing and how easy it is to spread, everybody can just have, like an entire city could have to go to the hospital all at once, like New York. And so that's the main problem, is that we want to keep it at a slow escalation and a steady line, not a straight shoot up to the top of the charts to where hospitals don't have enough manpower or enough inventory to handle it.
Well, personally, we've had an epidemic of some type, call them pandemics, a terrible epidemic every 2 years now for more than 20 years. This is COVID-19. This is number 19. Next year it'll be number 20. There'll be number 20.
Oh, it's actually not number 19. There was actually a bunch of like false rumors about this. I looked at a thing from the people who named it, and it's COVID-19 for 2019. That's when they found it. They initially named it the Wuhan virus and got in trouble for that. And so they changed it to COVID-19 for the 2019 version. But it's not the 19th version. I thought the same thing.
Okay. Well, the point still remains that, and thanks for clarifying, because it came in December of 2019, I would assume. So, yeah. But the point still remains. I mean, we have been frightened by the hysterical, to me, the hysterical left. And the reason it's the left is because they want to use this to enlarge governmental control. So this is just another way. They said that AIDS was going to get into the regular population. It was going to spread beyond IV drug users and gays into the regular population, and it didn't. And then, swine flu and on and on and on. They've used this to try to gain governmental control and scare us. And so right now, at the moment where I am, in my mind, I'm not getting hysterical. I feel like I have a friend who he got it, and he was in a hospital for a few days, and then he got over it, and then he's out and he's doing fine. So Dr. Fauci said today that as far as they can tell, they have every reason to believe that if you've had it, then your antibodies are done. You'll never have to worry about it again. Of course, that doesn't mean that you won't have to worry about the next mutation. It might. Your antibodies might even stop the next mutation from affecting you. But Italy is a special case, because the area where the center of it is a retirement zone for lots of Chinese and lots of old people. It's a retirement area for both Italians and Chinese. And they got started with this thing very late. So they were already far beyond what we are now before they even started trying to get a handle on this thing. So it's the area of Lombardy, which is the center of their epidemic. And they were very late getting to the table with this thing. And I believe we are ahead. And I really think that Trump is probably right, that we're going to be able to get loosen up on things 1st of May, end of April, Easter, 1st of May, and we're going to see life come back somewhat normal. But as I've already said, there will be things that'll never be the same. Never be the same. So I don't know what will have changed by then.
Yeah, I'm not anybody who watches my shows knows I am not one to willy-nilly give up my rights. Like, that's what I talk about 90% of the time, is that I believe I have rights and I want to keep my rights. In this case, I do think this is a time where I would be okay with them taking my rights and having cops all in the streets telling me whether or not I'm allowed to go outside. And I will agree with you on this. I do think Trump is in a no-win situation where if he goes out there and tries to play like the strong father leading us all through a difficult situation, then the media is going to say he's downplaying it. If he comes out and says, you know, hey, everybody run and take cover, get your bunkers ready, like this is going to be a long one, then he's fear mongering. So there is a no-win. It's a no-win situation. But I would like to see our local leaders doing more to actually enforce these shelter-in-place initiatives, because nobody's paying attention to them. Like, the more and more everybody realizes that it's not being enforced, the more and more everybody's going outside. I mean, there were people going outside just to go to the pie bar yesterday, or just to stop at McDonald's, or just to, you know, take a walk at the park or something. That's not helpful. that's not all that helpful.
Yeah. Well, it has made life a little more difficult for me. I had to go to Home Depot today, and you had to get in one single file line, 6 feet apart. It was stretched across the parking lot, and waited in line forever because, you know, as one person they had only a small number of people that were allowed in the Home Depot at a time. So, you know, as each person would leave, another person would be allowed in. So it was a 1-for-1 ratio, you know. So I had so many things to do, and I had to wait in line forever to be able to get in. So it's inconveniencing me, you know, and it's inconveniencing everybody. But the bulk of the authority is in the hands of the governors, because they have the National Guard at their disposal. And if they pull that National Guard out and they start sending them here, there, and everywhere, you're going to see a major change. So, you know, a mayor can only do so much with the police. And by the way, police are sick as well. There are tons of police that are out right as we speak. There are hundreds of police in Atlanta that are sick and can't come to work. So I hope that's the case. I hope that they're sick. Not that I would hope they're sick, but I hope they're not just saying, look, I'm not getting out there and you know, exposing myself. I hope that they're telling the truth, and I you know, I tend to believe they are. But you know, they're brave to get out there and be in the public and touch people and do what they've got to do. They're brave anyway. So I appreciate them. I'm definitely a law and order guy, and I appreciate the police. But I you know, I hope that all that are out for the right reason. That's all.
Yeah, and all of the medical workers too. I mean, I know that this is a lot harder on them. We know one, Christina, who works as a EMS. So what about the stimulus package? So I know I am, like, by beliefs and by ideology, I'm a conservative. I normally align with Republicans. Right now, not so much. I have my issues with them, and I'm very outspoken about that. And when it came to the stimulus package in the Senate, it seemed to me fairly obvious, though lots of people were blaming the Democrats, but it seemed fairly obvious to me after watching the entire debate over whether or not they should send this money to all the Americans, that Republicans were really giving a lot of money to big corporations, not so much the small businesses, not even less to regular citizens. And right now, it's all of the small businesses that are shutting down and going home. It's the big corporations, the big franchises. Those are the guys who have enough money to stay open through all this until all of the little guys are shut down, and they're the only ones left. So they're the last ones, I think, that need any sort of stimulus.
This is very much what happened. Unfortunately, I was bankrupted in the 2008, 2009 crash. I owned 100 homes at the time, and it took everything. I literally ended up with nothing when it was all over. And I watched the fat cats with the, in the corporations and the hedge funds and everything. Those guys made out like bandits. So, yep, I see that. However, there are corporations that may be too big to fail. This is not going to banks as much as the one in 2008, 2009, 2010. It's not going to banks like that one was. That one basically left out the little guy. So I got no relief out of that one at all. I got nothing. Yeah. But
why would it go to banks at all, though? Why would banks be getting anything right now? They're the ones most likely to survive all of this. It's everybody else who's much less likely to survive.
Well, I didn't look at the 1,500 pages of the bill, so I'm a little bit behind the curve here. But
Fair enough.
Listened to at least 10 to 15 hours of explanation of it. So I can say that from my vantage point, it looks like the bulk of it is going to businesses and states. So I think 500 billion was going to states, something like that, and another 500 billion was going to businesses and like Boeing, to try to keep Boeing and Delta and some of these guys afloat before they just totally crash and burn and close. And then the bulk of the rest was going to small businesses and to individual Americans. And I'm not going to get any of that this time either. So this is going to bypass me again, but I continue to work small jobs. So it's not as bad on me as it is on a typical person, but 3 out of 5 Americans are hourly wage people, and they are hurting, and they're going to hurt real bad. So again, I started out by saying, I believe that this is going to shake up America, and we're going to be a totally different country when this is over. We may be a lot like my parents lived through the Depression. Okay, so I grew up listening to stories about the Depression day in and day out, and families lived all together in pretty large homes in those days. They typically had all 3 generations, grandparents, parents, and children all living in one house, and having, surviving together, working things out together. And we then, as time has gone on, then after the war, it was single family homes, and that absolutely didn't happen anymore. That whole era was gone. And we may go back to that. I think money is going to be scarce for a while, and I think we may end up going back to, multi-generational homes. And I think it's gonna rearrange the deck, so to speak. But the fat cats always come out fine. So it seems they find a way, and they get the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. I employ very poor people. I employ homeless people and people who barely have a place to live. They live in, move from place to place. They live in their car for a while and live in a basement for a while and in a back room for a while, and they're hurting. So I'm doing all I can to try to give them work. And I had took several out this week and let them work for me and paid them what I could pay to try to make sure they don't starve. And I don't know that they're going to get any money either, because they don't pay taxes. Everything that they get is under the table, so they don't pay taxes, so they didn't file a return, so they won't get any money. So it's a catch-22 for them. So there could be some bad times for those types of folks, and I feel terrible for that. And I'm going to say something. I'm going to veer off the topic here for a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I'm a minister, and I'm very, very aware of what the Bible says. And it says that in the last days, perilous times would come, and that, there would be the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are already saddling up. They're already, and some people are going to turn off right now. They're going to go, uh-oh, we got a kook. I'm not a kook. I'm very level-headed. I'm a business owner. I'm very level-headed. So I'm not hysterical. I'm just telling you that the Bible is very clear that before Jesus comes again, that the bulk of the population of the world is going to die. The bulk of the population of the world will die from various things, from earthquakes, from diseases. When it calls it pestilences, and that's really pandemics is really what that is. And then from war, and then numerous other things will kill off the bulk of the world. And at the Battle of Armageddon, those that are still left, basically, they go to war, and then that one battle, the rest of the male adults of the world will die. So, you know, it's got to start sometime. And I've been a believer since 1970, and I've been expecting it to come any minute. So this may be the very beginning of it all. Who knows? It may not. It may not. We may totally rebound, and it may happen in 100 years. But I see things that, to me, indicate that we are ready to begin the process of getting the world ready for Jesus to come again, the Antichrist to rise, and Jesus to come again. And the governments of the world have got to get more and more powerful, and this is going to allow them to get more and more powerful just overnight. We're seeing a change in the way the citizen is relates to the government and the way the government controls the citizen. So I think that this is going to mean a change that's going to eventually lead to the Antichrist and to Armageddon. So I know that sounds, some people are going to just, their eyes are rolling right now. And this guy is an absolute kook. I'm not a kook.
Well, no, we had, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this, Chatty Jones or Chat. Yeah, I'm not sure, but he's been disagreeing with almost everything you said, but this is actually, he said for the first time he's agreeing with you. I agree with this for the most part. I don't know that this is the thing. It seems like every year there's another disease, there's another virus, and it gets worse and worse all the time. And so it seems pretty obvious that they're only going to get worse and that there's going to be more and more of them. And these are, the Bible talks about we've got fires in Australia, we've got locusts in Africa, we've got what is it, global warming. Like, we have all of these issues right now that seem to be aligning for the apocalypse, but I don't know that it's all I don't think it's gonna end that quickly. It's just, but it does seem to be moving right along the way that it's supposed to.